You have no idea what sort of people these Athenians are. They are always thinking of new schemes and are quick to carry them out. They are bold and adventurous. And when victorious, they make the most of their advantage. When defeated, none give so little ground as they. They give their bodies for Athens as if they were public property. They use their minds for Athens in the most individual way possible. They make a plan. If it fails, they all feel the sense of loss. If it succeeds, this success is nothing in comparison with what they're going to do next.
That is how, according to the ancient historian Thucydides, the Athenians were described by their neighbors and rivals in the 5th century BC. The same Athenians who built the great temples you have just seen, the ruins of which are still standing after 2,400 years. I want to talk to you in this film about these extraordinary Athenians and about the unique civilization which they produced. I hope to give you some idea why the great age of Athens is considered to be one of the most brilliant moments in human history, and why Athens has been described as the most civilized society that has ever existed. You will see how the Greeks, and above all the Athenians, were not only great builders of marble temples and statues, but also the first people in the world to develop the art of the theater, to establish philosophy on a rational basis, and to carry out a bold experiment in government by the people. You will see, in short, how the civilization of Athens 24 centuries ago laid the foundations on which Western civilization is built today. The heart of Athens, today as in ancient times, is the Acropolis, or high city, the great rock on which most of the ancient monuments are still to be seen. These monuments were not civic or public buildings. They were temples, and nearly all of them, including the famous Parthenon, were dedicated to the goddess Athena. Within the Parthenon itself was a colossal statue of the goddess by the sculptor Phidias, the most famous artist of the day. Phidias' statue was destroyed long ago, but perhaps this Roman copy may help us to visualize the magnificence of the original, inlaid with ivory and gold. Who was the goddess Athena, and in what sense was she the patron deity of the Athenians? Here is a picture of Athena taken from a vase painting of the period. You can see that she wears a helmet and carries the spear of a Greek warrior. And in this picture, she also wears the aegis, the strange cape fringed with serpents, a symbol of her superhuman powers. Still, it is obvious that Athena does not correspond to the biblical notion of one God, the creator of heaven and earth. For the ancient Greeks, of course, there was not one God, but many, Zeus, Hera, Apollo, and the rest. And each of them had one or more distinctive activities. Thus, Athena's concern, as her warlike costume shows, was for Greek warriors. But she was not the goddess of war as such. She was the goddess who defended the city against enemy attack. And above all, she defended her own city, Athens. But she did more. As guardian of Athens, she was also the guardian of all the civilized arts carried on within the city. She was the patron deity of the potter, the smith, the sculptor, of all the artists and craftsmen whose work brought prosperity and fame to Athens. Thus, for the Athenians, she represented not only the military defense of their city, but also the skill and intelligence of the citizens. And in fact, in later times, her name became the symbol of all knowledge and wisdom. Thus, she was the perfect patron of her city, for the Athenians themselves were not only a nation of soldiers and patriots, but also of writers, thinkers, and artists. Let us take a closer look, then, at the Greek achievement in the field of art. The Greek approach to art, and indeed their approach to everything, was characterized above all by a sense of structure, harmony, and proportion. This attitude was so important for the Greeks, in fact, that they called the universe itself a cosmos, that is to say, a harmonious structure, a world order. This Greek sense of structure and form applies in every field, but of course it shows up most clearly in the visual arts. Here is an impressive statue of a man. It is not Greek, however. It is Egyptian. The statue has a powerful sense of form, which the Greeks obviously admired, for they used the same conception in making statues of their own. You can see here what the Athenians were striving for in their statues. It was something the Egyptians had left out, a sense of humanity. The Egyptian form was frozen and rigid. The Greek statues come alive. They seem to move and smile and breathe like human beings. Remember, as you watch, that this entire series of statues, from the archaic to the fully naturalistic, was worked out in little more than 150 years. What we witness in Greek sculpture is, in a way, the discovery of the human body for the first time in history. What we witness also is the Greek sense for monumental form, for a form capable of expressing the strength and permanence of the stone in which it is carved, or the bronze in which it is cast. Here in this group of figures, we see the use of flowing line and delicate carving in the treatment of the human body itself, and also in the draperies in which it is clothed, both body and drapery seen as objects of harmony, grace, and proportion. No artists in the world, before or since, have surpassed the Greeks of the 5th century BC in conveying natural form in stone with such artistic perfection and power. The Greek sense for form in 3 dimensions was also applied to the art of making pottery. Here, the Greeks perfected a limited number of forms which were not only beautiful, but also useful. This, believe it or not, was a typical cup or bowl for drinking wine. There were many other forms. The vase on the extreme left was used for storing wine, the next one for carrying water, the third for transporting oil or wine, and the fourth was used in ritual offerings for the dead. But the decoration on these vases reflects another art form in which the Greeks excelled, the art of drawing and painting. Large-scale painting by the Greeks has almost entirely perished. What we have are the smaller designs painted on the pottery. These show us how the Greeks succeeded in rendering natural forms in 2 dimensions. Here again, the achievement of Greek, and above all of Athenian artists, is unique and unsurpassed. In the early archaic period, the artist drew quite formal and stylized figures in black on a red background. Gradually, as in the case of sculpture, the figures become more lifelike. At the same time, the artists experiment with reversing the color scheme, painting red figures on a black ground. Here is an unusual vase with exactly the same scene, painted in both styles on opposite sides. Sometimes the artists add more colors, including a white background, as in this beautiful vase by the so-called Achilles painter. At its best, the drawing on a Greek vase is as fine as anything that has ever been done. But vase painting has another interest as well. It offers us a unique glimpse of daily life in ancient Athens, a document in which nearly every activity of Athenian life is illustrated. Citizens of Athens, charges of the warrior goddess Athena, were often called upon to go to war on behalf of their city. They were fighting, of course, for their way of life, for the life represented on the vases. But they were also fighting for something which a picture cannot describe. Throughout the century and a half during which the Greeks were making their amazing discovery of the human form in sculpture and painting, they were also working out a form of orderly government under law in which free men could rule themselves. This was the life of the polis, the independent city-state, which reached its fullest development in the democratic government of Athens. But at the beginning of the 5th century BC, the freedom of the Greek city-state was suddenly threatened from without. Xerxes, the king of Persia, with an immense empire at his command, brought the whole weight of his army to bear on a few small cities in Greece. We must remember that Athens and her neighbors never even approached the size of our larger cities. At the time of the Persian Wars, the total population of Athens cannot have been more than 100 or 150,000. Yet Athens and Sparta, whose citizen population was even smaller, and a handful of other Greek cities banded together and actually succeeded in beating back the overwhelming power of the Persian Empire. This was an astonishing feat and requires some explanation. What was the vital element in Greek civilization that accounts for both their artistic and their military success? The Greeks themselves thought of it as a superiority due to their way of life, their life in the polis as free men. And in a sense, they must have been right. One of the earliest battles of the Persian Wars was at Marathon, where the Athenians stood alone against a great Persian army and defeated it. For an Athenian who took part in the battle, this remained the proudest moment of his life. Here, for example, is an epitaph from the grave of one Greek soldier who fought at Marathon.
Under this monument lies Aeschylus the Athenian, Euphorion's son, who died in the wheatlands of Gala. The grove of Marathon with its glories can speak of his valor in battle. The long-haired Persian remembers and can speak of it too.
Aeschylus the Athenian, proud to be remembered as a citizen soldier who fought for his city at Marathon, and not one word about the great achievements for which we remember him today. For this is Aeschylus the tragic poet, the world's first true dramatist and author of the first great plays ever written. That the creator of Greek tragedy should wish to be remembered as a citizen soldier points up the vital link in ancient Athens between art and citizenship, between poetry and national life. In fact, every one of Aeschylus' tragedies could be used to illustrate this theme. Aeschylus' greatest work is the Oresteia, a trilogy, or series of 3 tragedies dealing with a single theme. We shall see a chorus from the first one of these 3 plays, the Agamemnon, in a later film. In this film, I wish to show you a scene from the end of the trilogy where Aeschylus poses and resolves the fundamental questions of justice and law. Agamemnon, king of Argos, returns victorious from the siege of Troy, but is brutally slain by his faithless wife Clytemnestra and her lover. According to the primitive code of justice, blood calls for blood, murder cries for revenge. Orestes, Agamemnon's son, is in duty bound to avenge his father by killing the murderer, his own mother. And he does so. But again, vengeance is called for. Orestes is now pursued by the Furies, terrible spirits of punishment from the darkness underneath the earth, who represent the curse of his mother's spilt blood. Orestes flees from Argos to Athens, but the Furies pursue him there. He runs at last for sanctuary to the altar of Athena.
I call upon Athena, goddess of this land. Come to my aid. Oh, let her come. Being a goddess, she can hear me from afar, and she can set me free from these who track me down.
Neither Apollo nor Athena's strength can free you. You are promised to us and fattened for our feast.
Ah!
From afar I have heard the clamor of your call. Who are you? What have you to say?
Lady Athena, I am of Argos. My father was Agamemnon, lord of ships and men, who died a death without honor when he came home. My mother, Clytemnestra of the dark heart, entangled him with trickery and cut him down. Although in exile at that time, I returned and myself slew her, the woman who gave me birth. I do not deny this deed. Dear was my father to me, and this was vengeance for his blood. The god Apollo had a share in this, and is responsible as well as I. It was he who spurred my heart, telling me what wrath would come if I should fail to strike the guilty one. Such is my case. Judge if it be right or wrong. I am in your hands. Whatever befalls, I shall accept my lot.
This matter is too deep for judgment by any one mortal man. Nor is it lawful for me to decide. In cases of such guilt, where there is curse of blood, you bring no harm to my city. I respect your rights. But these too have their rights, their appointed duty, and cannot be brushed aside. Since, therefore, the burden of this case now rests with me, I shall appoint judges of manslaughter from among my citizens, put them under oath, and here establish a law court for all time to come. Call then your witnesses. Get ready your evidence. I, meanwhile, shall choose the noblest of my citizens. They will swear to uphold the law, to deal out justice and to determine where in this action the truth can be found.
When the goddess Athena returns in the next scene, she brings with her a group of Athenians to form the court of the Areopagus, the ancient governing council of Athens, conceived as the first law court in human history, and, in the words of Athena, established for all time to come. Thus was resolved for ancient Athens the conflict between two opposing conceptions of justice. The primitive blood feud, with its nightmare cycle of revenge, was replaced by a civilized system of orderly justice under the rule of law. Thus we see how the art and dramatic poetry of Athens were a direct expression of all that was best in the life and civilization of the city. In fact, the performance of the plays by Aeschylus and other dramatists was itself a public event, part of the religious celebration in honor of the god Dionysus. The performance took place in the theater of Dionysus, the god's sanctuary at the foot of the Acropolis, and the audience numbered as many as 15,000 Athenians at one time. The performances given here were paid for by a wealthy citizen who acted as sponsor. When Aeschylus' victory play, The Persians, was staged, the sponsor was a young man named Pericles. Pericles eventually became the most powerful and perhaps the most famous of all Athenians of the Golden Age, the period during the middle of the 5th century BC, when Athens was clearly the dominant city in all Greece. Under the leadership of Pericles, the power and democracy of Athens reached their height. It is true that democracy in ancient Athens did not include everything we mean by the word today. Women were excluded from citizenship, and the institution of slavery existed. However, if we define democracy in terms of the participation of all citizens in their own government, then we must admit that no government in history has ever been so democratic. Nearly every public office was filled not by voting, but by drawing lots among the citizens, with the result that everyone had an equal chance to serve Athens in an official capacity, as magistrate, city councilor, police commissioner, tax collector, judge, what have you. This unique blend of popular government with outstanding leadership under men like Pericles explains, so far as anything can explain, the brilliant achievements of Athens in the 5th century. As I mentioned, Pericles acted as sponsor for the Persians of Aeschylus, and he was also a friend of the most famous of Athenian artists, the sculptor Phidias. It was Phidias who was put in charge of the best known of Pericles' accomplishments, the adornment of the Acropolis with splendid buildings.
Perhaps we can best understand the civilization of Athens by imagining what these buildings were like when they were new. So new that the artists have just finished painting the carved figures high up on the Parthenon. Perhaps, too, we can understand the civilization of Athens by recreating the event for which these buildings were especially designed, the national celebration known as the Panathenaea, the festival held annually in honor of the goddess Athena. In its greatest splendor, the Panathenaic festival lasted for several days. There were the games, foot races, chariot races, gymnastic contests of boxing and wrestling, contests in music and poetry. The official prizes, specially designed vases filled with olive oil from the sacred grove of Athena. On one side of the vase, a picture of the goddess with the inscription, "From the games at Athens," and a picture of the competition on the other. The poet Pindar describes the joy of a victor who carries off such a prize. the fruit of the olive in cunningly decorated vessels of fire-baked clay.
The climax of the festival, however, came with a solemn procession. The procession in which the whole citizen body of Athens marched up to the Acropolis to honor the goddess Athena.
The procession gathered at dawn. In it marched representatives of the Athenian people from every corner of the land of Attica and from the entire Athenian Empire. The sculptor Phidias made this procession the subject of the marble frieze which decorated the Parthenon. Here we see part of it. Horsemen preparing to escort a ceremonial gift to the goddess. A sacred garment, the peplos, to adorn the oldest image of Athena on the Acropolis. Here maidens unfold the richly embroidered robe. The procession, having crossed the agora, or public square, approaches the monumental gate of the Acropolis, up the steep west side of the rock. First come the heralds, the magistrates, the chief officers of the city, the water carriers, the priests with animals for sacrifice, the judges of the games, and the victors. Then some on horseback, some on foot, men of the great Athenian families. Delegates from the allies, from tributary cities, from the colonies overseas. The whole procession a summary of the imperial might of Athens. Then all the citizens of Athens, marching toward the temple of their goddess, Athena.